You know what sounds like a fun time? Talking about tariffs. I know. I've been told I'm the life of the party, but hey, I'm guessing that this is probably a word that most people were not thinking about this time last year. Tariffs was just an old vocab word you were quizzed on during high school history class. But now, you can't escape hearing about tariffs. The tariffs are starting, the tariffs are stopping, never mind, they're back on again. Now they don't apply to Apple or Nvidia, but they do apply to small businesses. Oh, and every country gets a tariff, including that uninhabited penguin island near Antarctica. It's a lot to take in. And honestly, by the time this video comes out, the precise tariff policy will probably have continued to change. However, unfortunately, my prediction is that certain things will not have changed. Like prices will continue rising, the stock market will continue being a mess, and people's jobs and businesses will continue being at risk. Whether you're confused or maybe just tuning out and want to wrap your head around something, I wanted to take this video today to talk a little bit more about what exactly this tariff chaos means for us as individuals, how it's going to affect our economy, and how we should be thinking about protecting our own personal finances. So let's talk about it. By the way, if you're new here, I'm Cara and I make video essays on the intersection of money, media, and culture. So if that sounds like something you like these kinds of videos, be sure to subscribe to keep up with more. All right, so big picture, what is going on? Like I alluded to earlier, just from when I started writing this video to when I was writing this very paragraph, the tariff rules have changed. So what I don't want to do is go into the weeds recapping every specific change that's happened, because then it might just be irrelevant. So instead, here is the big picture. This year, Trump started putting tariffs on almost every single country the US trades with. It doesn't matter if they've been our ally for decades or a vital trading partner we rely on for necessities, nearly every US trading partner has been given a tariff of at least 10%, at least as of the time I'm writing this script. And 10% is more on the lower end because some countries got way bigger tariffs. For a while, Canada and Mexico were slapped with 25% tariffs, but those have gone down to 10% for now. Meanwhile, China is the current odd one out with a whopping 145% tariff. Now I want to back up again just because I realized I haven't actually explained what a tariff is. And without that context and how the percentages play into this all, I feel like these numbers are as helpful as when people give me highway numbers when they're trying to give me directions. Like, you're gonna go down 409 and then you're gonna head over to 52 before you hit 15th and 2nd. I don't know what that means. That is like Morse code to my brain. I understand that Google Maps has like fried my noggin, but I just can't do road numbers or street names. I just can't. Anyways though, back to what a tariff is. The simplest way that I can explain it is that a tariff is a fancy name for a type of tax. It's a tax or an extra charge on an item that is coming into the country. Who pays that extra charge? Whoever is bringing the item into the country. This one's confusing because at first when we say, oh, we're putting a 145% tariff on China, it sounds like the Chinese government or Chinese manufacturers are going to pay up, right? But in reality, the burden of that payment is really resting on whoever is actually bringing the item into the US. And oftentimes, that is an American business owner.
Who pays the tariffs?
The Chinese government pays the tariff.
When a product comes into the US, there's something called a tariff sheet.
Okay.
I, as the buyer of that product, follow US law and pay the tariff. I'm an American citizen, an American taxpayer. I pay that tariff to the US government, and that increase in the cost I then sell to you for a higher price because I've got to cover that tariff.
So with tariffs, the American business owner has to pay more to import. That most likely will lead the business owner to raise prices on their product for us consumers. That way they make rather than lose money on a sale. I mean, if you owned a business and you spent $100 to get a product in, you wouldn't want to go and sell it for $90 because then you're losing money. You would of course want to make the price higher so you can actually make a profit. I'll talk more about this in the section of my video where I talk about how tariffs are impacting real people, but hopefully this provides a helpful foundation for now. So like I said, with the big picture, what's important to know is that 1, tariffs are being added to almost all of our trading partners, meaning it now costs more money to bring products into the country, which raises prices on those goods. 2, the goal of the tariffs is to ultimately encourage the United States to start building up its own manufacturing power again. again. A lot of people complain about how manufacturing jobs have gone overseas in the past decades, so Trump argues that by putting tariffs in place, we would discourage overseas manufacturing and raise our own. The intention is similar to telling a kid that they'll have to do chores if they want to watch TV, which might actually encourage them to read a book instead. Now, as to whether that strategy is really working, we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but spoiler, the results have not been great so far and not have gone to plan. And the final thing to know about this tariff chaos situation for now is that because the tariff policy keeps on changing so sporadically, like I said, literally different policies from the time I thought of this video to when I started writing to this moment now, all of those changes create instability. And as cool as instability looks in one of those log rolling competitions, in the economy hates instability. It hates not knowing what to expect, because if you don't know what to expect, you can't plan. And when you can't plan, you have no idea what money can be made or lost. So you end up putting things on pause, which causes the whole economy to start slowing down. I was trying to think of an analogy to really drive home how instability can be really bad for our economy. And here is my attempt at the analogy. You guys know that I love my analogies. So imagine you're hosting a dinner party, and this is a fancy dinner party. It's a multi-course meal, you've got appetizers and desserts planned, the whole shebang. The problem is, the guests' dietary requirements just keep changing. At first, you knew that a couple of the guests were lactose intolerant, so you adjusted the menu, but then you're told it now needs to be a completely nut-free meal. Scratch that, you actually can have nuts, except for peanuts, and now actually cashews are a no-no. And you know that filet mignon you planned? Toss it, because everyone is a vegetarian now. Never mind. Just as one guy's a vegetarian, though maybe tomorrow he'll be a pescatarian, who knows? Oh, and by the way, if you mess up any of this, they're gonna throw food at you, all right? They're gonna throw it hard, and they're not gonna help you clean up. And at that point, as the chef, or American businesses for this analogy, you might just decide you don't wanna throw the dinner party in the first place. And boom, now no one gets food. All right, thoughts on the analogy? I feel like longtime viewers will be very proud that my analogy wasn't poop related this time, though I am still very proud of the one that I did for the comparison culture video. But right here, this is maturity at work. So now we all have an understanding of what this chaotic tariff situation is to begin with. But now let's talk about how it's going to affect all of us. And I mean all of us. Doesn't matter if you own a small business or not, if you're American, if you're a student in school, if you are invested in the stock market or not, the tariffs are going to affect you. They probably already have. But how? Well, one way is through how expensive your daily purchases might become. One simple example is how we're seeing prices from Chinese companies like Shein or Temu skyrocket because of the tariffs. Now, if you know my channel, you know I'm not a fan of how those companies promote overconsumption, but I also understand some people get their low-cost essentials from those sites. And so an item suddenly costing 300% more is going to make a major dent in someone's budget. When I was researching this topic of these skyrocketing prices, I wanted to make sure I was getting all sides of this issue, which is why I chose to use today's sponsor, Ground News. If you haven't heard of them, Ground News is a website and app that gathers news sources from around the world and political spectrum to help you cut through the bias of every story and form your own perspective. So when it comes to Shein and Temu's prices spiking because of the tariffs, Ground News brings together all the different articles being offered about the subject so you can compare headlines in one place. It'll show you whether that article is more left or right-leaning, and in the coverage details section, you can see how coverage is primarily center at the moment for this topic. And here is my favorite feature. Ground News will do a bias comparison that breaks down how the different sides of the aisle are framing this issue. You can see how the right and the left both agree on how price increases have been drastic due to the tariffs, but they differ in how they interpret the consequences and motivations. The left is focusing more on how these price hikes are directly hurting American consumers, whereas the right is more focused on talking about how this is a necessary pain in order to achieve Trump's broader trade strategy. Now, this is just one story out of many out there. With Ground News, you can curate your feed to the issues that are most interesting to you. And you can even see your own news bias based on the stories that you're reading. If keeping up to date with the news is really interesting to you, and especially being able to see how different sides of the political spectrum are covering this trade war, I highly recommend checking out Ground News. If you're interested, you can subscribe to get 40% off the Vantage plan by scanning this QR code code on screen or using my link ground.news/Cara. And thank you so much to Ground News for sponsoring today's video. So back to how the tariffs will impact people, because yes, there are a lot of unknowns, and yes, the situation, which is now being labeled by many as an official trade war, is changing by the day. But we already have a sense of the impact and how bad it may continue to get. And who will really be affected? Kind of everyone. Small business owners, those with investments like retirement accounts, everyday workers like your local barista, and anyone who buys something from groceries to computers. Let's start with that last one because it most likely applies to every single American and even some non-Americans who are watching this video. Like we talked about before, we're seeing companies like Temu or Shein spiking prices by up to 300% because of the tariffs, which of course affects how much money American consumers have to pay and how much money they have left in their budgets. And that's only one example. Clothing, tech appliances, even prices for food are rising due to the tariffs. The food one is especially concerning in my opinion, because of course food isn't just something you can take out of your budget. You kind of need it to survive. And even though the United States does make a lot of its own food, we still import a significant amount, 15% according to the FDA. Think coffee, seafood, fruit, and avocados from Mexico.
Avocados from Mexico.
As fun as that song is, prices rising across the board for consumers isn't so fun. I do really worry about what this will do for people's budgets. Because I'm lucky I'm only shopping for one and I have a healthy emergency savings account and I'm not living paycheck to paycheck. But that's not the case for a lot of people. And so yes, it won't super affect me if my spending has to go up 20% because of the tariffs. But for others, that 20% might be the difference between making rent that month or being able to pay for a doctor's appointment or being able to go out to eat one night for your birthday. Those are real consequences and real constraints people will start and have started feeling from the tariff so far. And because people's budgets will be tighter, the amount that they'll be willing to spend on other parts of the economy is going to be less. To quote my favorite Disney song ever, "We are all connected to each other in a circle in a hoop that never ends." I'm pretty sure they were talking about the economy when they said that. But it's true, the economy is basically a spider web of money exchanges. So if more people are having to spend their money on higher priced goods because of the tariffs, that's less money that can go to eating out at your favorite restaurant or tipping a barista or paying for any number of services that people offer, like hairstyling or the gym or house renovation. So now every one of those businesses and the people that work at those places are now bringing in less money. On top of them, also having to spend more money for their everyday expenses. And with businesses likely making less money, experts predict we'll also see a rise in job loss. Like recently, we saw UPS lay off 20,000 of their workers, citing the tariffs as a direct reason. Again, a hoop that never ends, folks. I actually got the chance to talk to tech reviewer and fellow YouTuber Just Josh Tech about this exact issue of how the tariffs are affecting hiring and business investments.
So I was planning, as I said, I want to supercharge this growth. I was planning to hire 2 more people this year, right? And I actually just had a resignation and I was planning to rehire for that job. I put all 3 of those jobs on hold. Why? Because I can see very clearly that consumer spending, particularly on consumer electronics, is slowing down. So immediately you think, okay, well, a business like my own, that's 3 American jobs just lost, right? We were going to hire 3 Americans for these jobs, gone. Obviously that, from my experience through working in large corporations, right, like at the bank in Wall Street, no business is going to want to invest billions of dollars opening a manufacturing plant when tariffs may change tomorrow. And that's the problem here, right? That tariffs are on, they're off, they're on, they're off. All a business can do is pause and go, we got to wait for this nonsense to be over before we invest. That's going to affect American jobs, right? Fundamentally. And because if they're not going to invest in major projects, they're not going to hire people in the US to fulfill those projects. And that can be people building factories, people training to build factories. It can be consultants who often consult on these large projects, right? So McKinsey, EY, all of those can have a knock-on ripple effect.
So already we can see how the tariffs and the instability that they're causing are causing people to be able to save less money and possibly not even know if they're going to have a job by the end of the year. But the tariffs are also affecting anyone who's invested in the stock market, which is a lot of people because most people's retirement accounts involve some kind of stock investment. If you've taken a look at the stock market lately, you'll see quite the downward slope as of late. Like the dinner party analogy I mentioned earlier, where eventually the chef just wants to give up on the dinner party altogether, businesses in the US, they don't know what to expect because the tariff policy is changing constantly and because of the dangers that a trade war poses. And so a lot of businesses are pausing right now. They're not sure what to invest resources in or what strategy to pursue because who knows what's going to happen next. Instability is not great for a stock market. For context, Trump's second term, so this one that we're in right now, recorded the third worst performance in the stock market during the first 100 days of any presidential term in US history. Again, for someone like me, I'm very lucky that I'm not super affected because I'm in my 20s. My horizon for being able to grow my portfolio is long. I can eventually recover over the decades. But that's not the case if, say, you're in your 60s and you were about to retire or you just retired. A 10% dip in the market is going to have a much, much bigger effect on that person's financial security. And lastly, let's talk about one particular group that seems to be getting hit the hardest from tariffs, and that is American small business owners. A few weeks ago, The Daily had a great episode interviewing Beth Benique, a business owner who's terrified that her business will have to shut down because of the tariffs. Benique's the founder and CEO of Busy Baby. The company was featured on Shark Tank. It's made millions of dollars, but because her manufacturing is done overseas, the tariffs are making her products so much more expensive to import. Expensive to the point where she can't afford to run her business.
In a word, what has it been like for you and your business for that 145% tariff to become your reality?
It's devastating. I cannot bring this product into the US now. I don't have that kind of money. And what that means then is if I can't bring in that product and I run out of what's in my warehouse now, then I no longer have revenue coming into my business. And what that means is I can no longer pay my employees. I can no longer pay my loans, to which my house is leveraged against. And in about 6 months, I could very possibly lose my home.
Josh from Just Josh Tech, who you saw earlier, also shared some of the small business stories he's been hearing.
I've been hit in the sense that I'm not hiring people, but I've seen some who are like, hey, I'm selling wood paneling, or I'm selling merchandising through my YouTube channel, right? The wood paneling guy, he's actually made some videos about it, how the tariffs have just killed his business. So he put an order through for like $27,000 of wood panels, which is more than his normal orders because they were doing well. So he has a YouTube channel. He's selling them through Facebook Marketplace. Ordered them through China, paid his $27,000 for them to be built. They came to the port. He gets a bill for another $27,000. He doesn't have the $27,000. Does he take out a loan, which he can't do because his business is not that established? Or does he send the panels back? But he's already paid for them, so he's lost $27,000 either way. So he's just out of business, right? And he's made some videos on that.
All in all, we can see that the tariffs are affecting all different types of people, to the point where global risk for an incoming recession is high, according to a recent Reuters poll with economists. But hey, economics is hard, right? It's like a black box. We couldn't have known this was gonna happen, right? Yeah, not exactly. The truth is that economists warned of this exact thing happening. I actually made a video back in the fall talking about Trump's tariff plan, and in that video, I explained how economists predicted cost of living would dramatically increase under Trump's tariff plan. Most economists, including openly Republican ones, seem to hate Trump's tariff plan because of how it could spark a trade war, hurt the American economy, and skyrocket inflation, thus making products you use every day more expensive. Now, if it isn't obvious already, I'm not a big fan of Trump's current tariff plan or how it was rolled out. I do think that the intention, to bring back more American manufacturing has some validity, specifically for key industries that are important for American security. And maybe with the right multi-year strategically placed tariffs and incentive programs, we actually could have garnered pretty good results. But big but, the way that we ended up rolling this out and the types of tariffs we ended up doing, I think is hurting the United States way more than it is ever going to help, and way more than any other country is going to hurt. And yes, you could argue that I'm clouded because my, current policy positions are more aligned with Democrats than Republicans, but so much of my take on all of this is based on real economists' analyses. One video I really liked lately was from well-known economist Jeffrey Sachs. I'll link the full video in my description box. It's definitely worth a watch because it breaks down a lot of important details about the tariff plan, like how the supposed trade deficit isn't a sign that other countries are screwing over the US, but actually that we're just spending way more than we're producing, which says a whole lot more about American spending habits and the fact that we refuse to properly tax the wealthiest people.
So the political system says spend, but don't tax us. So we run a chronic deficit in the United States.
But another part that I really liked was when Sachs explained that these US tariffs are not going to hurt other countries like China the way that Trump thinks they will.
In a trade war between the US and China, China wins. China does not depend on the US market very much. It's about 12% of China's exports. China will do just fine.
Look, we as Americans, we're well known for having a bit of an inflated ego, We literally call ourselves Americans, which is like multiple continents worth of people. And unfortunately, I think that ego kind of bled into the way that we imagined these tariffs going. We thought that we were so important to trade with that us leaving and kind of making it hard for people to trade with us would make everyone else beg for us to come back. It's like if in the show Glee, Rachel Berry stormed out and quit the Glee Club. Like, yeah, she is super talented and it would hurt to lose her. But Glee Club has so many good singers that they're gonna do just fine without Rachel's voice. You got Santana, Mercedes, Kurt. So Rachel Berry leaving just means one of those three are gonna be the main star instead. And Glee Club will keep on pumping out campy singing moments.
Now this dance ain't for everybody. Only the sexy people.
Now that I have managed to squeeze in a Glee reference into this video, I think it's time to wrap it up, but not until we talk about one last piece. And that is, what should you be doing individually for your personal finances when it comes to all this tariff chaos? With prices rising and a potential recession looming, is there something you should be doing with your money today? So here is what I think you should be doing. The big disclaimer being, I am not a financial advisor, I am not an economist, so this is just what I'm thinking about when it comes to all of this chaos. One, make sure that I have an emergency fund of at least 3 to 6 months. You should always aim to have an emergency fund, but it's even more important when times are tough. Job loss, medical emergencies, surprise extra expenses, all of those can be cushioned with a good emergency fund in a place like a high-yield savings account. Two, be more ruthless about cutting unnecessary expenses. As costs rise, budgets get tighter, and you may have to cut a lot more unnecessary spending than you've had to in the past. Think about where in your budget might be good for cutting out and have a plan in place to cut. And three, when it comes to investing, do not try to time the market and do not panic sell. It is so easy for investing beginners to panic sell when the prices start dropping. And it's scary. I get it. You start looking and you're like, oh, I'm losing all this money. But remember that it's not a real loss until you sell. If you panic sell when things are dropping, yeah, well then you've lost the money. So don't do that. Instead, stay the course, keep on investing a little every month. And honestly, what I'm doing is just not checking my accounts. I throw money in, but I don't need to know how they're doing day to day. It's just gonna stress me out. Fourth, if you can, I would say avoid spending money on like big ticket imported items. This kind of ties into number 2 about ruthlessly cutting unnecessary spending. Because things like cars, electronics, home renovation materials, imported items like those are getting more expensive and can take a huge chunk of money out of your savings. So unless you really need it, I would say avoid trying to spend on those big ticket items. And last but not least, vote and stay informed. I know this one is more high level, but ultimately the price spikes and looming recession we're seeing are a direct result of policy from elected officials. Who we vote for has an enormous impact on the way our economy goes and the daily lives of everyday people. So as best you can, try to stay informed about what candidates are running during elections that are going to actually help everyday people and help the economy and grow it versus shrinking it. But what do you think? Have you felt the impact of tariffs yet? Is there something something that I missed. I'm sure there is. There's just so much to cover here. But what are your thoughts about all of this? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below and what you want to see me cover next. Also, if you got this far in the video, okay, econ nerd, hello, thank you so much. Thank you also to my patrons on Patreon and those on Buy Me a Coffee for supporting this channel. Thank you so much, Josh from Just Josh Tech, for being willing to be interviewed for this and chatting with me. And just thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.